Ladies, gentlemen, and tarnished of all ages, if there's one thing that we can all agree is a real bummer in Elden Ring, it's death, right? Nobody likes dying, and one of the biggest causes of death in the game is, ironically, drinking a healing flask. If you time it wrong, you get hit by another attack, and if that happens before the heal goes off, that's often death in Shadow of the Erdtree in an important fight. On top of that, a lot of bosses have small enough openings that they rarely stop swinging, and when they do, you often have to make a choice. You get to attack, or heal, but rarely both. So what if we decided no more of that, no more counted our heal and flask down, no more choosing between attacks and healing, because why not just do both simultaneously? This is a significantly improved take on something that we did in the base game, a vampire-themed build from the ground up around the purpose of using skills and effects to regain health so effectively that we never actually have to stop attacking and replace the Crimson Flasks entirely. And then of course, any damage that we can get on top of that, as this isn't like Prayerful Strike where you just spam your weapon skill build. This is a normal plain Great Katana build that happens to have a lot of healing for it if you mess up a roll here or there. And that makes it extremely comfortable, especially while learning bosses. That said, to make this work as well as we can, we lean a little bit on the Blood Tax skill, which applies bleed buildup and activates a multi-hit bonus as well, while also draining health with every hit that you do with this. We pair this with Bloodflame Blade as a weapon buff for the weapon itself on the largest, longest, highest damaging weapon that can have Blood Tax for our purposes, also having base bleed buildup on the weapon itself to add on to it all, and another special effect within this build that we'll talk about later. And then you have a bleed machine with decent damage on the attacks in general that also just heals itself with every attack for one reason or another. All that said, let's dive into the weapons for this, the armor set that you want to use, the talismans that I've got on, and then the Wondrous Flask upgrades, and of course the spells that we use too, with any other additions on top. And as usual, I'll assume that you already have or at least know how to get any of the items in this build that are from the base game. First things first then, we have the Great Katana, just the regular old Great Katana, as it is the only Great Katana capable of being infused with Ashes of War, and both its scaling and its general hitbox make it actually really quite strong of a partner for blood tax, not to mention the weapon having natural bleed itself, so you can run it in heavy for the relief of stat burden that gives us when using a weapon two-handed. That said, to get this one for yourself, it is in the lake directly northwest of the Great Bridge North site of Grace, and it is near the Ghostflame Dragon that is sleeping there on your first approach. Aside from that, you also want a seal for casting spells, and the best one for this is actually the Dryleaf seal. This is the best incant scaling seal for specifically 27 Faith, which is just slightly above the threshold that we need for Golden Vow anyways, and the fire damage of Bloodflame Blade scales exclusively with faith-based incantation scaling, so we have to use this over the Clawmark seal for that specific reason. This is located here on the map, just a bit northeast of the Recluse River downstream, site of Grace, from some slight drops down a couple of ledges beside some gravebirds on the cliffline. Past that, for your helmet, this is a build that causes a fair amount of bleed, so we want the White Mask Helmet for a 10% boost to all damage done for 20 seconds after a bleed procs nearby. Then in your other slots, we have full Rakshasa armor if you want to min-max offensively, as that is 6% bonus damage for all 3 pieces equipped. Otherwise, you can, of course, just choose to use the fashion of your choice, or even just wear heavier armor up to our equip load limit. Then for our talismans, we have the Godskin Swaddling Cloth, which heals you after a certain number of hits within a small time window. The number of hits required for this changes with each weapon class, with larger weapons tending to require less hits than smaller and faster ones. Great Katana is very interestingly specifically 4 hits to trigger the heal, which is 3% health plus a little bit more. Blood Tax is exactly 4 hits, with this talisman triggering every single time that we use the skill. It's actually a pretty neat specific overlap with Great Katana that makes it really worth using here, and this talisman is usually quite bad, but it works quite well because of this. And in total, with this on, you get a 15% heal from a full Blood Tax with a little bit of extra flat health on top, and that is just before you consider later bonuses that we'll be adding on top of this too. Then we have the Lord of Blood's Exaltation Talisman for a 20% boost to all damage after a bleed occurs nearby, which will be happening frequently, the Shard of Alexander Talisman for a simple 15% boost to weapon skill damage. Then in the last slot we have the Rotten Winged Sword Insignia Talisman if you are able to use a lot of blood taxes, as this will always have a bonus active for the last hit of this skill, or for a fight that requires more sort of just regular weapon hits in between, you would probably instead want the Two-Handed Sword Talisman, as we two-hand the weapon anyways. I should also mention here that Sacred Bloody Flesh is a consumable that is an option for this build, as we apply bleeds frequently, and this is a better buff than Flame Grant Me Strength if you apply bleeds, but it has has to be farmed if you want to use it, so that's up to you how much it matters, and these occupy the same slot, so it's that simple. Past that we have our Wondrous Flask of Physic tiers, and it's actually quite cut and dry for this one. First you want the Crimson Sapping Crystal tier, which in most situations really isn't that great, but it sort of stacks on top of everything we're doing to push it just past a bit of a threshold into being even better, which is 0.75% maximum health regained every time you hit an enemy. Add that on top of the previous 15% from blood tax with Godskin, it's 4 hits, so another 3%, and then you have 18% health restored from a full blood tax, and this one applies more to non-blood tax as well for any smaller hits that you just get with the regular weapon. This one comes from the Furnace Golem beside the Ancient Ruins West Site of Grace, and you can easiest kill this by first running Torrent over to actually wake him up and activate the fight. Then instead you want to go up and around back towards the Grace through the runes, out through the side like so, to end up on the cliff above the Furnace Golem. From here you can throw 3 hefty furnace bots down into its basket head, and that's the highest scaling Furnace Golem in the whole DLC, down with no issue at all. The second tier then should probably be the Blood-Sucking tier. Normally this is a matter of comfort, 20% bonus damage to every type of damage that you do at the cost of health drain, but because we are focused so heavily around regaining health, we actually pretty heavily counter the drain from this to make this a general positive, as long as you aren't getting hit that often. Of course, if you are struggling for any reason, you can always replace this, actually ideally, with the maximum health increase tier, as nearly all of our healing is actually health percentage based. Following that then is our spells for the build, Golden Vow for a 15% boost to all damage done, and a 10% boost to damage negation for 80 seconds after casting. Flame Grant Me Strength for a 20% boost to physical and fire damage for 30 seconds after casting, as well as a small stamina regen buff too. Then we have Blood Flame Blade to put a Blood Flame effect on our weapon for bleed buildup over time after every hit, with fire damage on top of it as well. Then finally Blessing's Boon just for our health regen buff slot for a flat 8 HP regen per second for 90 seconds. Then we should talk about a bonus sort of cherry on top for the build, your Great Rune. We don't normally recommend specific Great Runes for most builds, as usually they're not specific to the theme that we're going for, but this is one of those rare exceptions where a rune arc will absolutely dramatically alter the feeling of combat if you use it, because we have access to Malenia's Great Rune from the base game, which gives you a Bloodborne-esque ability to heal damage that you take back up if you deal that damage back within a short time. This just elevates the healing to a level of extreme comfort in this, in most encounters, actually at least provided you know where your openings are to use the weapon skill, or even just to get little pokes in here and there. Then with that covered, we of course should talk about how to spend your level up points. First, 60 Vigor, as usual, just for a good chunk of health to begin with to hit that soft cap, 27 Faith and 10 Arcane, so you can use our spells and our seal, 18 Dexterity to wield the weapon itself, then 54 Strength because we use this weapon on heavy scaling to get the most raw damage out of it. Then you probably want a few bonus points in mind like I have here, just so you don't have to use your flask too often, but other than that you want to pile points into Endurance for just as much stamina as you can get to let you retain control through longer combos, and use blood tax at the end of them when available, instead of having to stand there and regen stamina instead. And now that you know everything to actually put the build together yourself, let's talk about how to play it and the buff cycle before important encounters. First up, we use the Rune Arc, of course, then Blessing's Boon because it lasts for 90 seconds, then Golden Vow because it lasts for 80 seconds, Blood Flame Blade which lasts for 60 seconds, then drink an FP Flask, and then your Wondrous Flask, cast Flame Grant Me Strength to end the katana, use another FP Flask if you really want to, and then just get in there, chief, fight that boss, smack him down to the ground with your big burning healing stick. A neat secondary note of this as well is you can change all of your flasks pretty much over to cerulean flasks if you really commit to healing through blood tax, and this will give you more healing over a prolonged and extended fight with the FP regen than just having your normal Crimson Flask would do. Though aside from me sticking to the theme 100% in the footage as much as I can, there are of course situations where a flask is more efficient to use, such as like cutscene phase transitions or attacks that force you to positionally dodge them so you can't actually hit an enemy. Outside of that, you just use blood tax on larger openings, but focus on dodging with using light attacks wherever you can actually fit them, as light attacks with Blood Flame Blade keep the bleed buildup going up, which really helps push our damage mid-combo. That just about does it for today then, everyone. The Great Katana Vampire build for Shadow of the Erdtree, a really fun concoction that sort of just changes the feeling of the gameplay loop in the DLC, and changes the choices that you make in each situation too, sort of just simplifying the game in a way that just changes the way that you view every fight. I hope you've enjoyed this, and hopefully you enjoy using this build too if you try it out for yourself as well. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.